What's going on, everyone? How are you doing today? I am going over my 5 highlights of the week. It's been a kind of a slow week, a little bit. Yes and no, kind of a little bit. I chose some interesting ones that I think sort of represent a broader view, kind of. They have a broader sort of theme, I guess you could say. And then one that I've wanted to talk about for a while, that's at the end. That's my fifth one. And yeah, I'm just going to get right into it. My number one is Christen and Tobin Heath, both U.S. women's national team players who just moved to the WSL in England, who are now playing for Manchester United. Their jerseys outsold every men's players in the first 3 days of their release. Now, I think this is amazing. I think this really shows the growth of women's soccer and the sort of upwards trajectory that it's on. It's pretty clear that they've had some kind of impact on the fans already for them to completely outsell the men's, who, you know, you have the likes of Paul Pogba, you know, Bruno Fernandes, you know, these big players, and yet they still completely outsold them for, 3 straight days. Now, again, this is a huge deal because it really is showing how much women's soccer is already growing. It's still growing, and it's getting even bigger every single day. And one day, as I really hope it does, I hope it really grows to the level of men's soccer and even more. Like, who knows? But yeah, this is a clear sign that people are paying attention to women's soccer more now, and they're getting the attention that they deserve. You know, because if you really watch their games, they play some. A lot of the times it's more interesting than the men's, to be honest, because they don't roll around every time they get hit and do all this extra stuff. They just play their game, and that's what makes it a lot more interesting. So I really like the fact that this happened and that it shows the clear growth of women's soccer. And I'm really excited to see where it goes from there. Now, number two, which is ironic that I put him here. I didn't even realize. My number two is Olivier Giroud is now the number 2 goal scorer all time for France. He scored a brace in France's 7-1 win over Ukraine. This takes his goal, those 2 goals took his total tally to 42. One over Michael Platini, who was at 41, and only 9 behind Thierry Henry, who was the all-time goal scorer with 51. And I thought it was very interesting to see a player who was constantly, disregarded and sort of just never really acknowledged. To see him reach those kind of heights, it's crazy. He's only 9 goals away from Thierry Henry. 9. And I know he's not known for scoring a crazy amount of goals in a short amount of time, but who knows? Maybe if he keeps playing for another couple of years, 2, 3, and he gets getting chosen for France, there's obviously a reason why he gets chosen for France. Their coaches clearly like him and what he brings to the table. He is a true professional, and he's really shown that at Chelsea, especially last season. I mean, he didn't really get any game time until after the break. And, when he comes out of the break, he performs incredibly well, and he just stuck with Chelsea. He kept his head down and kept working, and he got his chance, and he took it. And now I could see him moving on very soon because seemingly he is the 3rd choice striker for Chelsea. However, for France, he's still, clearly a part of their plans. They might want to introduce some younger players soon, but it's pretty obvious that they still want him around. And I do personally think that he's a bit underrated. He doesn't always perform, but he does tend to show up in the games that matter. And at the same time, I can see some of the criticisms. A lot of people say the biggest part of his game is his hold-up play. It doesn't always pan out like that, though. He doesn't always do incredibly well, even with that. So I can see some of the criticisms. I'm not saying he's the best striker in the world and he's the best striker all the time, but he's definitely a player who hasn't gotten a lot of love. And I feel like it's undeserved. I feel like he deserves some love, something. He's a true professional in every sense of the word, and he just keeps his head down and working. Now, I guess the question is, does he have what it takes to hit, to pass Thierry Henry? And then, say he does pass Thierry Henry, then what are people going to say about him? He's a top goal scorer all time for France. Now what? He's still bad? He's still, you still think he's not as good as everyone says? What would people think of him if he hits that, that milestone, that huge milestone? To be a top goal scorer, not even in your league, but in your country is huge. You become, an icon. Thierry Henry is an icon in, French football. So it's like, what are people going to say about him if he does get all-time? I just think that's really interesting. But I really like the fact that Olivier Giroud is now the number 2 goal scorer. Now, my number 3 is the Colorado Rapids had their 3rd game in a row postponed due to positive coronavirus tests. Now, they have already gotten a good amount of games, and I believe the MLS is like 16 match days in or 17, but they have only played 13. And right now, as it stands, they're at a pretty big disadvantage because every time there's a positive test, the facilities go down, they can't train, and that's less time that they can really work together, stay fit, and keep moving. I believe they're 8th in the table in the standings. So they're not great, not bad right now. They're bang average, and they probably could use the training with each other to try and get off to an even better, to try and get the ball rolling on the season and get better as it goes on. And it's a very tough situation for them. However, I think this also represents how the U.S. kind of rushed sports. And I mean, you look at other sports. You've already seen football just recently. American football already had their first game postponed. The Steelers versus the Titans, and multiple players have tested positive, like Cam Newton and Stephen Gilmore from the Patriots. And then in the MLS's back tournament, multiple teams had to drop out because of positive tests. The MLB had a multitude of games that were postponed due to positive tests. Now, like the NBA had the bubble, but there were tight restrictions, but it worked out. So it's like, I understand it's tough because the players I know the players want to play. It's their livelihood. It's their, it's what they've worked so hard for. And, when they're not able to play, I know it hurts. I know it hurts them. I know it hurts them to not be able to play, but it just seems like we as in Americans, U.S., are just kind of going around about it the wrong way. I know there's a lot of financial issues that can also come into play, but I just think we just need to find a better way where the players can play. However, we can still stay healthy. Not just the players either, the staff, the people with the stadium upkeep and all that. I just want to see both sides be happy at the end of the day. I want them to find a way to play and be healthy at the same time. That's that. So for number 4, Thomas Tuchel versus sporting director Leonardo. The PSG sporting director Thomas Tuchel is the PSG manager or coach. Tuchel is unhappy with the fact that many players have left PSG on a free. From Thiago Silva, Edison Cavani, Choupo-Moting just went out, I think, on loan to Bayern. And in exchange, he's got really not much. I'd argue no real starting players, maybe some bench players, but they haven't really had any reinforcements brought in. And Tuchel's problem was that, PSG made the UCL final last season, the Champions League final, and you would think that, the board would want to come in and reinforce the squad and make them even stronger, so that way, when they make it to the final again, they win this time. But they haven't really brought anything in. And Thomas basically told the fans, lower your expectations this season. We're not going to have the same outcome. And that's unfortunate. And it seems like he's already kind of, not necessarily given up, but you could say he's being realistic, but I don't know. It's kind of a downer look at it. It's a very glass half empty sort of look. In response, Leonardo, the PSG sporting director, spoke on behalf of PSG, basically saying that they did not like what he had to say, and pretty much told him that if you stay, you got to respect our policies. Now, Tuchel is in his last year of his contract. It does not look like he will renew. It seems like the relationship's strained at this point, and he likely feels that he doesn't have the backing of the club, which, from his point of view, I guess he could see that. Now, I do find it interesting because Leonardo does have, PSG in general, have to deal with the financial fair play rules after they, spent so much money on Neymar and Mbappe. They had to sell, I believe it was around, they had to sell players in order to make around 60 million euros, and they clearly haven't done that. They're not even close to that yet. So Leonardo is in a tough boat, so is Tuchel. They're both in tough boats. I just think it's ridiculous that these two are using the media to communicate with each other. I think that's a bit more on Tuchel than Leonardo, but ultimately they could easily just call him or show up at the facilities or whatever and talk. I just think it's ridiculous that they have to go through the media. It's like when two parents go between their kid. One parent tells their kid to tell the other parent this, or two people, two friends tell another friend. It's like, why? Just talk to each other. Stop being childish. Just be adults. be professionals, talk to each other, work through it. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. Like, just talk. Just talk. That's it. And I think it's a bit more on Tuchel, but I don't know. It's a really interesting situation. PSG clearly cannot spend all the money in the world to be able to buy players anymore, and so Leonardo's in a tough boat for having to reinforce the squad, and Tuchel's in a tough boat because he's got to make sure the squad's successful. So at the end of the day, I would honestly be shocked if Tuchel's there next season. He might not even make it to the end of this season. Who knows? It might be too much. Like I mentioned, the relationship might be too strained, but I just think it's a very childish sort of situation, the way they've handled it, and I think they just need to talk and work it out. And if Tuchel needs to leave, then you have Pochettino or Pellegrini who are sitting there waiting to potentially become the new manager for PSG. And I just think all this drama is just not good for the club. Now, my number 5, moving on, is the current state of the Premier League. This weekend, we saw Aston Villa stomp Liverpool 7-2. And then United got thumped by Spurs 6-1. And another one I was very surprised to see was Leicester losing to West Ham 3-0. Now, West Ham aren't a bad side by any means. However, they have proven to be inconsistent in recent seasons. So it's very interesting to see them come off, a big win against Wolves and back it up with a big win against Leicester. Leicester just got done beating Man City 5-2. Were Man City that bad? Were Leicester City that good? Now the question is, who can be consistent this season? I just think it's crazy that Aston Villa and Everton are the only undefeated teams in the season. They've won every game they've played so far. And the questions are, is it the strange start to the season, the lack of preseason? Is it the coronavirus? Is it the financial problems that some of these clubs are facing? Is it, the off-field antics, a la Abraham and, Chilwell going to Abraham's birthday party? And although I do think, those types of things do contribute to some of the struggles these clubs have faced, I think ultimately it's a shift in the sort of dynamic of the Premier League. I feel like these smaller teams just aren't satisfied with just parking the bus the whole game anymore and waiting for that counterattacking chance. That's sort of, they don't want smash and grab wins anymore. They want to win the game. They don't care about draws anymore. They want to win the game. That's why you've seen this season, there's only been 2 draws, and we're 5 match days in or 4 match weeks in, and you've only seen 2 draws. These teams are going for it. And I feel like the best example of it is Leeds. They lost their first game 4-3. They win their next game 4-3. It's like, they don't care. They know they're going to get scored on by these bigger teams. They don't care anymore. They just want to win the game. So if they can outscore you, then that's what they're going to do. They don't care if they concede 3, 4, 5 goals. As long as they're scoring more than you, more than the team they're facing, they won. They don't care if their goal difference was awful. They won. That's the point of, that's their point. That's their goal. And I feel like the biggest question for these smaller teams, though, is how long can they keep up these performances? Can they be consistent? A lot of these teams don't really know what it takes to win the title, or a lot of the players on the teams have never won the title or even won a trophy for that fact. So do they know what it takes? Do they have what it takes? And do they have the depth and the fitness to be able to keep up with these bigger sides? Even if City or Liverpool or Chelsea or United, even if they're struggling, they have depth, they have quality across the board. So, they struggle, they're able to throw in other players and try different things, at will and see what works. So do the smaller teams have what it takes? Are they the type of teams that are just going to stick with the same starting 11, not change a thing, and just rely on the players not getting injured, which could be a huge factor? I feel like you don't ever see a team go through a season without getting in some kind of injuries. So how long can they keep it up? How long can they keep going? And I think these smaller teams stepping up is actually really exciting. And this is going to lead to more exciting seasons, bigger upsets. More happened back in the 2015-2016 season when Leicester won the title out of nowhere after just getting promoted not too long ago. And ultimately, I think there's just going to be no more free wins in the Premier League unless you're going against Fulham, who are just awful. They've been very bad this season. I think this makes for a tougher road to the title and a much more unpredictable season, as I've learned through my freaking predictions that I've gone all wrong, because Jesus, it's like you can't predict this season. You can't. You throw a number out there, you throw maybe this team wins, maybe this team wins. It's so unpredictable this season that I just think it's going to be way more exciting in the future. And I'm glad that there's going to be no more real free wins, so to say. And by the way, when I say smaller teams, I put that in quotes too, because it seems like they're not small teams anymore, because it just feels like the playing field's leveling out. These smaller teams might have less quality, but their tactical prowess and their tactical play is clearly on par with these bigger teams, and that's what's allowing them to keep up. So this is very exciting. This is definitely going to lead to some more exciting seasons, and I really am looking forward to the rest of this season and the seasons to come if these smaller teams keep playing the way they do. But yeah, those are my top 5 highlights of the week. What do you guys think? Do you think, where do you see women's soccer heading? What direction do you see it heading in the next, let's say, 5 years? Where do you see women's soccer in 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20? Where do you see it? Do you feel that Giroud is underrated? Do you feel he's overrated? Do you feel he deserves to be the number 2 goal scorer all time? Does he, how do you feel about Olivier Giroud? What are your opinions? How do you feel, if you're an American, how do you feel about how, the U.S. has handled bringing sports back in? And overall, how do you feel, these different sports across the world have handled the coronavirus? Who has done it the best? Who's done it the worst? For Thomas Tuchel, it's a very childish situation, but how do you feel about it? Do you feel Tuchel's in the wrong? Do you feel Leonardo's in the wrong? Do you think PSG overall is going to get affected by the drama? Do you think it's just better that Tuchel moves on now? What are your thoughts? Now, for the Premier League, what are your thoughts on this season? Is it, as unpredictable as it been? Do you feel that this is just a fluke? Do you feel these teams are just on a really good form? Do you feel that the COVID-19 has really affected the bigger teams? What are your thoughts? Why do you think the season is going the way it is? But yeah, again, those are my 5 highlights of the week, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. Hit that bell so you're notified when I upload. Go check out my socials. My Twitter is @BlueHermit1. My Instagram is @BlueHermit_. Please share the socials with all your friends, family, everybody know. Let the people know Blue Hermit's where it's at. And I'll see you guys later. Bye!